Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, it says some interesting things. The law is the law. This is in regards to High Court Judge Mugure Thande, who said that the political truce that was brought together by the National Dialogue Committee, known as NADCO, does not override the Constitution, and that therefore the IEBC selection panel must continue with its work. Now, this is because, there might be a constitutional crisis in the looming, right? IEBC is set to begin the process of boundaries delimitation that is supposed to happen between 8 and 12 years. It's supposed to be concluded when? By the end of this month?
It says March.
By the end of March.
Yeah. By March 6th, we should have new boundaries.
Yeah.
We should have new boundaries.
Yeah. Because, the last time...
We live by the
the last review was March 7, 2012.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we all know the boundaries delimitation process.
Yeah.
Yes, it
so
is
that was
long.
actually just the gazettement.
It is long, it is tedious, it is emotive. There are people around this table who I know would not want to be in the same boundary, but I am just saying. But wanajijua, so nona vile wamereact, they know themselves. But even then, she then said that the intervention of the court is justified because the bipartisan talks are, to the best of her knowledge, not anchored either in the Constitution nor in the law. So that brings us to an interesting point about two things. One, that report in itself, and two, what it says about the IEBC and how... the process of getting all the commissioners in. By the way, it has no commissioners. There are also some by-elections that are pending, which means there are a group of Kenyans who have been denied the right to representation because the IEBC is not fully constituted and therefore cannot conduct that. The boundaries delimitation process is also very important. So where are we, first of all, with that? Because the NADCO report itself was launched, and it was pretty unceremonious. I remember it was done sometime in the middle of, it was in the weekend. We know both principals obviously know what's in it, but usually what we would expect from a process like that would be official presentation of that to principals of either side of the talks, and then perhaps meetings. Maybe those have been happening, but it would seem like after the report was released, everything went quiet, which then brings us to this point where Justice Mugure Thande speaks about the IEBC. But there are, of course, many other issues that were arrived at in that report. So, Sam, let's tackle IEBC first. So, quite a few deadlines that are looming. So, we're going to do our boundaries in a month or less? Oh, wait. We're not even going to do that because we don't even have a commission.
IEBC, yeah.
It is not possible to do them. And if you recall, in the year 2020, the then chairperson of the IEBC, Wafula Chebukati, had just come from the 2017 election, and he was saying that it's now been 8 years. It is time now to start thinking of reviewing the boundaries. So they were setting out to start the work that has to be done, because before you get to the point of public hearing, so you're hearing people from different constituencies and saying why they want their constituency kept or extended or whatever it is, there's so much work, groundwork that has to be done. But I remember that time, resources were not allocated because they were seen as this is not a priority. There's so many pressing issues. It was the COVID year, so that could wait anyway. So initially it was about the budget, but then COVID happened, and therefore IBC could actually practically not continue the public hearings because of the restrictions that were there at that time. But you see, 2020 was the 8th year. 2024 is the expiry of the 12th year, which is, like you said, next month, March 6th. But that's the last day that the IBC must gazette the new boundaries as per the Constitution. Of course, that is not going to happen because the preliminary work was done, but there's no commission to go ahead and listen to the people on what they have to say, because public participation or the public hearings on boundaries must be presided by a commissioner, wherever it is. And even if they're not sufficient to be there has to be a guideline. The modalities of doing it must be approved by a commission. Now, we have not had a commission since January last year, when Wafula Chebukati and his two colleagues left office on retirement. And then Irene Masit was removed from office, and the other three had resigned the previous year. So in that situation, IEBC cannot do anything. That is why even today, they have not been able to conduct at least 5 by-elections in the wards and Banisa constituency by-election, despite the Member of Parliament having died close to a year ago. So all those challenges, and that is what Mogure Thandi was pinpointing and saying that, well, you guys may want to speak, but there's no place in law that really makes space for political expediency to override the Constitution. And indeed, if you look at it, even common sense will tell you that that does not happen, because I remember when all this conflict started, the president was saying that, so the members of the opposition are complaining. I have already appointed a selection panel. It is not within my power to stop the process. And indeed, he has no power under the Constitution to stop the working of a selection panel. Indeed, even if the National Dialogue Committee requested the selection panel led by Nelson Makanda to cease the recruitment, still, NADCO does not have any power. Imagine, NADCO is not founded on any known law or any known constitution, but they directed a selection panel founded on a known law, a known constitution, and they stopped working. So indeed, what has been happening would appear almost an illegality. Of course, you're not blind to the political situation that has been going on and therefore necessitating the kind of talks that we've seen. But now we're in that situation that we don't have any clear solutions of where the IEBC should go. Even if you appoint new IEBC commissioners and they go ahead and do public participation to review the boundaries, whatever boundaries you find outside the 12-year limit, what do you do with them? Because they cannot be constitutional. And I've been hearing some members of parliament and politicians saying that it is possible for parliament to make an intervention to amend that provision in the constitution so that you can keep it free. In fact, National Dialogue Committee is already proposing an amendment to the provision that talks about 8 and 12 years. So you can see we created a problem. Now we want to correct it through an amendment to the constitution based on the current problems that have been
the current political situation
by the politicians.
Yeah, sorry, before we go on, just to buttress that point, I'd like us to listen to the second soundbite there with the Leader of Majority once again raising that issue about trying to solve this in Parliament.
The Leader of Minority has agreed on the membership in the House Business Committee and also mobilize their members to quickly adopt the NADCO report, as he mentioned. And we will do the same on the Kenya Kwanza side so that we have a law, because justifiably the people of Banisa and the other wards that are due for by-elections deserve representation as a matter of their constitutional rights.
Jamila?
Yes, we're talking about Constitution and what it says, and the fact that this 12-year deadline for reviewing the boundaries is in a pita. We're just a month away. As I said, the last review was on March 7, 2012. So now that the electoral body that is supposed to oversee this exercise is not properly constituted, there's a problem. Article 89.2 of the Constitution gives the Independent Electoral Boundaries Commission a maximum of 12 years, as I've said, after the promulgation of the supreme law of the land to review the boundaries. And it says that the IEBC shall review the names and boundaries of constituencies at intervals of not less than 8 years and not more than 12 years. But any review shall be completed at least 12 months before a general election of members of parliament. The IEBC is currently being run by the Secretariat, as you said, after the term of Commissioners Wafula Chebukati, Boyamolu, and Abdigulia expired on January 17, 2023. And of course, the other four, Cherera 4. We know what happened to them. They were resigned or forced out after the elections. But then now, there's another issue that comes in, and I was reading somewhere about how the issue may plunge us into a constitutional crisis next month because of there's a question about the legitimacy of at least 27 constituencies that have now climbed to 67. According to IEBC data, the number of constituencies has reported risen to 67, yet they are below the constitutional average population quota required for their continuous legal recognition. So that raises questions about the legality of this whole thing. So those constituencies ziko, but kisheria hazijafikisha idadi ya watu ambao wanapasa kuwa kwa hiyo constituency. And as you said, this process, again, 2012, 7th March is when the process ended. That was 2 years after the promulgation of the Constitution. We need at least 2 years to do this from beginning to end. Not, in fact, hatuna IEBC, wakati huo tulikuwa na IEBC. So start constituting it, go through the whole process, do public participation, do everything that you need to do as per law, so to be able to have the boundaries. It's not going to happen.
I think even the process of getting the commissioners in, because it's the selection panel that then gets, and although I believe that they said that started some of the work and had gotten applications and I think had gone as far as shortlisting. But then you see, even the process itself of getting commissioners into office is another lengthy period that will certainly not be done in the next month or so. And that is barring any political noise that will surround that process, even just the legal process of getting them in. Then there's obviously the politics around that. Then you get them in, and remember, no commissioners. So there's even no institutional memory or people who've been carrying that forward. Because I remember there was also a thing about phasing them out so that it's not that all commissioners leave at once. But obviously we know the circumstances that took place after the 2022 election. But there we are. So you get new commissioners in, which will obviously be past the deadline, and they're quickly getting straight to work. And we know what happened when we tried this with getting commissioners in shortly before they were to conduct a general election, and we saw what happened in 2017. That election was nullified. An election is one thing, boundaries delimitation is yet another. Very emotive issue, very sensitive, and you put in new commissioners who are supposed to get onto the ground and get started almost immediately. Why do we find ourselves in this loop, Linus? Constantly. We know what needs to be done.
Yeah, because I don't know, because we like it that way. We prefer it this way. And let me say that the IEBC is divided into two. There is the commission and there is the secretariat. The secretariat is made up of professionals, employees who are working there as permanent and pensionable staff of the IEBC. Let's put it this way. This is the engine of the election management and election administration in this country. In there are very qualified Kenyans who can comfortably wake up and run a general election, run a by-election. They can do all this. But where are our problems as a country? The problems are on the commission side. And in my view, the commission is in charge of the politics, the political, managing the political issues within the election system. And that has always been the most problematic side. And you pointed out correctly, this is not the first time that we are living to the last possible minute. Between 2017 and 2022, look, when did we get 4 commissioners in? Very late, months to the election. And for no reason at all. For the simple reason that the president at the time just decided he shouldn't declare the vacancies of the commission, of the 4 commissioners. Now, this is the problem with our election management system. Politics and electoral politics in this country have been made to a chess game. And already the players are on the chess table right now. What happened, and you saw the majority leader saying it's the law. Yes, it is. And in terms of a chess move, this was a big one. Advantage Kenya Kwanza. Because remember, what the judge did was not really out of the ordinary. The judge simply said, oh, this is the path, according to the law, of filling vacancies in the IEBC. So selection panel, proceed with your work. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that pronouncement by the court. In fact, that is what is supposed to happen. And the chair of the panel found his voice after many months in Siberia. We don't know what Nelson Makanda and team were doing when NADCO was operating in the sides. Nelson Makanda spoke yesterday and said, we are capable of doing this. We are going to proceed with our work. Because remember, this bit is political management. When political will is low or unclear, then this is where we find ourselves in. For me, my interpretation of what has gone on is NADCO doesn't know what it wants. NADCO doesn't know what the IEBC should look like. NADCO is trying to how do I put this? Basically, see what will happen. You know, let's keep talking. Yeah, let's keep talking. But someone went to court and said, "Hey, there's a selection panel. Why can't you do your work?" So the political players there are failing, and especially from the opposition side. If there was anything they wanted to achieve through NADCO, they should show and demonstrate what that is, and then take things to the next step. How come there's never been a next step after Bomas? There's never been a next step. Now what we hear is, no, the judges are wrong. The court is wrong on pronouncing that the panel should proceed with its work. No, the court is not wrong. The panel is supposed to actually proceed, especially in the absence of another political process. And right now, in my view, NADCO is passive, semi-dead. So it's inactive. So what is it doing? You know? So you can't say, okay, court, selection panel, don't go that way because this is what we are doing.
But what are they doing?
There is nothing that NADCO is doing right now. We've been promised, is it next week when Parliament resumes on the 13th, that they'll then adopt the report and then we see some movement from there. But here is one thing. Will Kenya Kwanza be willing? Will it come to the House with the same spirit of Bomas? Or will it come and say, no, the court pronounced itself, and we respect the court.
Yes, exactly.
We respect the court.
And you know, even when you think about it politically, the country and the situation that pertains right now in the country is not the same as when this dialogue committee was put together. At the time, there were protests. There was a certain political push that was being driven by the opposition. That was then quieted by the National Dialogue Committee. They had their sittings. They heard from everybody that wanted to make their presentations before them. That report was then released very quietly in December. Here we are now close to 2 months later. So the sort of agitation that existed at the time that necessitated, according to the political players, the formation of that committee, that circumstance and that situation and those circumstances do not pertain today. To the extent that what is the idea of implementation? What's the push now that the opposition would say, hey, you know, there is this report, this is what we committed to doing, let's do it. So politically, this is 1 for Kenya Kwanza and 0 for the other side. What they managed to do was what they needed to do, which was quiet down the opposition, quiet down the protests, get them into talking, have this report released, and now here we go. One of the other things, IEBC is one of them. There were, you know, a raft of other proposals and recommendations, including reducing the cost of living. Well, I don't know how they proposed to do that, but the cost of living is an issue that still pertains. We've not heard any push from the time that report was launched to say, okay, these are our proposals. This is what we're going to do. However, in the intervening period, what have we seen? Increases in the cost of just quite a few, including the cost of electricity, the cost of transport, the cost of fuel. All of those, like, life has continued, irrespective of this report that is sitting somewhere and waiting for Parliament to reconvene. So, you know, on the whole, you know, where is that report? And here's the other thing then that I would like to then take a look at. Taxpayers' money was spent, you know, on this process that ideally is supposed to save us all some money and put a few extra coins in our pocket. And here we are.
Do you know why nothing much has happened? The answer is in Muguruza and his judgment. It is not based on any non-law or constitution. So really. But also, even as you speak about the selection, you see now, we may sit here and refer to National Dialogue Committee. And I remember Raila Odinga over the weekend said that juzi mahakama moja, and I'm quoting verbatim, so if there are certain words that are not very comfortable, it is verbatim. Juzi mahakama moja inasema ati ile kamati ya kutetea wanachama wa IEBC endelee na kazi yake. Hiyo ni upuzi. Hiyo kamati haiwezi endelea na kazi kwa sababu imevunjwa na bunge. That is not...
So those are not your words.
Those are not my words. End End of quote. Not accurate though. Another one, tulikubaliana kwamba mambo ya kuunda upya kwa tume ya uchaguzi mpaka tushirikishwe, mpaka tukubaliane na majina yote. Ile ripoti ya Wandai na Kalonzo ikienda mbele ya bunge ipitishwe, ndio tutaanza mambo ya IEBC. So the NADCO report, it is not really reconstituting IEBC. It is proposing a formula of picking the selection panel. Let me just go through that. At the moment, the selection panel is comprised of 7 persons. The new proposed list is of 9. So what is happening is that the nominee of the Public Service Commission is being removed. Currently, there's a nominee, actually a member of the selection panel, that will no longer be there if this is approved. The Political Parties Liaison Committee has 1 person or 1 nominee. It is being proposed to raise that to 3, but also to give weight to different political parties within the PPLC based on those major political parties and the minor political parties. Parliamentary Service Commission has 2. It will retain at 2, but the selection criteria changes, which will be given to the majority and minority sides. The Interreligious Council of Kenya has 2 nominees that will remain at 2. The Law Society of Kenya has 1 that will remain at 1. The Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya has no nominee at the moment. It is being proposed to have 1 nominee, and that makes the 9. But also they are saying that the selection of some of those organs, it should actually be competitive. So,
and you're talking of the selection panel.
The selection panel.
To make it clear to our viewers that this is not the IEBC.
This is not the IEBC.
Yes, yes.
And so if that selection panel is now constituted, so first, what has to happen is that Parliament reconvenes, it goes through the NADCO report, adopts it, and this adoption will vary based on what you're saying. Are you adopting piecemeal or the entire of it? Because also there's the creation of the position of Prime Minister. And not everyone may want that to happen, but that has to happen first. After adoption, then there has to be pieces of legislation. So for instance, the IEBC question may be one of those. You want to amend the IEBC Act, the schedule that talks about the composition of the selection panel. So once that is amended and signed into law, remember it has to go to both houses, then now after that is when now you can have the selection panel comprised. As this is happening, there has to be applications made to the panel so that now that selection panel, after advertising and applications are received, they have to do, excuse me, they have to do the shortlisting.
For the selection panel?
No, I'm saying...
Now we're getting to IEBC.
Once the law has been signed by the president, it becomes law. Selection panel is constituted. Remember, there are certain positions that has to be filled competitively. Yes, for those ones, there has to be applications considered and then approved. Then Parliament has to endorse that report of the selection panel. After the selection panel has been formed and gazetted, then they convene. They advertise the position. There are several timelines that are indicated there. They advertise the positions in the newspapers with the national circulation. People present their papers. After they present the papers, then shortlisting will be done. After shortlisting, Kenyans will be invited to give views about those being shortlisted. Then the interviews will be held. After the interviews are held, then they have to come up with a shorter list that they will send to the president for appointment of IEBC commissioners. Now, the Mugure Thandi judgment is saying the selection panel must continue forthwith. I have a problem with that on one point, for this reason. So, yes, they can continue because that is the legal thing to do. But in the first place, why did they stop? There was no legal stoppage that ever happened. If they are to continue right now, these applications were made close to a year ago. Maybe there are candidates that are no longer interested in that position. And even then, how sure are we that this process is watertight now? Because it was interfered with by an order from NADCO. What has been happening to those applications? Could it be there's a chance that people may have planted applications there? So that integrity of the entire process is already injured. And at a time that Raila Odinga and the opposition are saying that we would not recognize the selection panel as is, then what happens even if that process is to continue?
And it's, by February 27th this year, it will be a year since this IEBC selection panel was appointed by President Ruto. And of course, they put the advertisement in the newspapers and people sent his name and the shortlisted. They were busy basically for the first 2 months until around April. Now, when this whole thing about the bipartisan talks came up, now akatulia. They literally were not doing anything, but they were still in office. Because looking through at this, I remember the budget for that IEBC panel was 84.5 million. It was passed in a supplementary budget. So by the time their sittings were halted in April, they had done about 16 meetings. And by that time, there had been the longest, in the history of IEBC selection panels, they had been in the office longest. Because if you look at previous ones, in 2 months, it was Meisha. But then you say, who asked them to stop? Who asked them not to continue? Was there any order? This
NADCO, which is itself not an entity that is
kwa sheria
legal,
that stopped the IEBC selection panel to stop doing its work. It doesn't make any sense to me because they're still in office, which means bado wanakula hela zao, bado wanalipwa, if it is in, because there was 84.5 million that was allocated to the IEBC selection panel in the budget.
Yeah, and so...
There's something else. Yes, the boundaries were gazetted in March 2012.
Yeah.
But the process of reviewing them started in 2009. I remember something called Interim Independent
Boundary IEBC.
Commission, led by
Ahmed Isaac. No, before Ahmed Isaac was Andrew Ligale.
Yeah. And they sat and they came up with a report that was presented, I think, in November 2010. Well, I read that.
No, it's fine. So you see, it still shows it takes longer.
So that was November 2010. Then after that, they handed that report. Of course, IEC was doing its work. Eventually, after the new constitution, IEBC was appointed. And it was IEBC not to look at what did IEC do, what did IEBRC do. They take the reports, go to public participation. Because this is new dispensation, a new commission, they have to be satisfied that despite the recommendations of the Ligale Commission, that's what the people want. So it is not a simple process. For the new commission to come on board and start the process of the review and go listen to the people, it may take at least a year, probably even 2 years. Remember, we have an election in 2027 that must happen. Those constituencies, if they are to be reviewed, they must be done
a year before.
So we're talking about by August 2026, we must have those boundaries. But even then, even if they are done, are they constitutional? And
then the electoral body that will come in also has, as you said, by-elections to handle. I think the one for Banisa was one of the reasons that the matter went to court before Justice Elena.
No, look, a lot of time has been wasted since this whole NADCO process started. And there'll be back and forth arguments as to whether the selection panel should continue with the task that it was appointed for. You see, the court will not be aware of the political processes. Courts can only be
blind to it.
Yes, you have to alert the courts through another act of parliament that now there is a new intention to do things differently. If that has not been communicated in our pieces of legislation, then there is no way the court can help politics. So the judges, the magistrates will interpret what is there at the time. What is the law as at now as to how to form the IEBC and the selection panel. So it won't go into, oh yeah, I'm a judge and I saw on TV there was something in Bomas. Was that about this one? You don't do that. You don't do that. You go with the law as it is written at the time. And I think as it stands now, right now, in my view, if you want to blame anything, blame the time that has been wasted.
Is that by mistake, though? Because it always seems like it is by design.
Yes, I spoke about chess. It's a chess game.
Yeah.
Once, if you enter these things, whether you are even in more complex political conflicts, including war and even independence negotiations, you have to have a plan. What do you want to achieve? How do you want to achieve it?
What tactics?
What tactics are you going to use? If you look at the negotiations for a free South Africa, the end of apartheid, and the first elections that happened now in 1994, the preceding period is very, very intense. Dates are negotiated. That is how politics work. Terms are negotiated. So even here, in our small ways, because I don't want to compare our situation to those complex ones, it's still the game of chess. And that is why you saw I keep saying that you need to look at what the majority leader was saying the other day. Suddenly there's something good coming from the courts, and we respect the courts.
Yeah, and on that, you know, the flipped
that
positions. Yes,
that's political.
I think with when the courts rule in favor of one, suddenly there's one side that says that is the law, as we've seen from the majority leader, and you know that's what the law says. The court was right. And then you have a turn of events where Raila is saying, who are ni upuzi? But then when it is different, when it comes to, for instance, the housing levy, you know, on one side they say, you know, but the judge...
the courts have spoken.
The courts have spoken. Yes.
No, so... You know, it's because they are all reading the VAR and saying, oh
interpretation
my. Yeah, they are correctly interpreting.
Right. Yeah.
Because Raila suddenly realizes, hey, did you just say that? And the panel can actually proceed and select the committee because there is no other law. There is no other law that suggests otherwise. Yeah. They are following the existing law, and they can correctly proceed, and Nelson Makanda and his team can correctly proceed and select.
From those that shortlisted?
Yes, from those, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
dust
those off.
When was the first IEBC commission appointed? November 2011?
Was it 2011?
After IEBC, yes.
After IEBC,
yes. November 2011, and the election was in March 2013. I think this is the only commission that I had so much time to prepare for an election. Then 2017, the Chebukati team was appointed in January 2017. Can you imagine? Just about 7 months to the election. For the Cherera 4 commissioners, they came in September 2021. The election was in August 2022. Yeah. Exactly about 11 months or so to the election. Then, if you are now in February 2024, the election is in August 2027. I think it's too early to appoint a commission. It's only that.
And the Kriegler report.
There's so much time. The only inconvenience, Jamila, is that boundaries have to be reviewed.
Yeah. But even with that, there's time.
And that is actually the only thing that is making the political discourse civil and almost friendly and harmonious. You can see that they are all speaking the same language. It's not because of the composition of the IEBC. On the composition of the IEBC, I'm very sure there is one political side that would have been very happy to proceed with the Nelson Makanda route. But now they realize, hey, there's this little matter of boundaries. And boundaries are also negotiated. You know, it's a give and take thing. And they all want that. Yeah. And that is still pending. That is the only thing that is actually making the conversation right now very civil. Otherwise, you would have seen the two sides saying rather nasty things to each other.
And all through, in majority of these instances, the leader of majority has been involved in the delay to review the IEBC Act that facilitated appointment of Cherera 4. It was not an accident. It was known for a very long time. Uhuru Kenyatta had no law to follow in appointing a selection panel, and therefore delayed gazetting the vacancies, because once you delay, once you gazette rather, then the law is set in motion that the processes have to be taken.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For a very long time, that act was not amended. That schedule that allows appointment of new commissioners. When Chebukati and team were appointed in January 2017, it was after that joint select committee of the Senate and the National Assembly that was sitting at Windsor for a very long time. So again, the appointment in November 2011 of the Isaka San team,
first one,
it was after, of course, the law was very clear that time that the president shall appoint a member, the prime minister shall appoint a member. So there was the involvement of Raila Odinga in most of these negotiations. So,
and it's always a crisis. Yeah. It's never done in an orderly way. So I don't know whether we are waiting for.
Yeah, for that one. Time, yes.
Yeah, for that
and
time.
Then now we start
like close to 2026.
Yeah. And harakisha everything now.
Yes.
First, harakisha the processes. So we seem to have followed the law.
Yeah, so there's time.
So will you vote in 2027? Which constituency?
Eneo bunge lako ni lipi?
Will it be legal?
Iko na watu wa kutosha? Iko na area ya kutosha?
Mko ngapi?
There's time.
Actually, quietly, they're waiting for a county. Not even a constituency.
Actually, we are, by the way. By the way, we truly are.
Yeah.
Look, there is time.
Yeah, that many. But on a serious note, I mean, look, the Constitution provides the criteria of how boundaries are determined, geographical area, the population, the culture of a people.
Yes.
And those things have to be put into consideration. So really, the justice to this country is to have commissioners in office to deal with those issues. Because if we do not deal with them now,
it's going to be
it will become a disaster moving forward. Again, constituencies are increasingly becoming not just units of representation, but units of service delivery. And even the sharing of resources like the CDF, which, well, never mind that one of the acts was was pronounced to be unconstitutional, but it is still applicable. So if that is to continue to be a unit of distribution of resources, then it is only fair that we have the proper constituencies as what the Constitution requires.
Yeah, I mean, take a look at bursaries and that sort of thing. That has of late been such an emotive issue. By the time you change boundaries, and then that becomes something else. But we have time. But
now we have time.
No, we always have time. We always have time. But for now, we don't anymore. At least as far as the show is concerned. Apparently, you know, we don't have time. But they do. That's where we conclude the show. Thank you very much for watching.
Convenience fee?
Wake up.
We are sending to my phone number, by the way.
Those resources, I mean, that's not convenient for me. So.
Well, I don't care.
Lipa. Utoke kwa mlango.
7, yeah, okay.
Not triple.
Na mutoe mena ya kutoa. That's the convenience fee. All right. So thanks very much for watching the show tonight. And always, Jamila, it's great to have you back.
Usiende tena. Asiendi, no. Mwaka mpya, mambo mapya.
Yeah, keep me company.
I know. Because
Disappeared for exactly the same time.